Reinvent yourself. Don't swim in the same slough.
This is an advertisement which we create,
Invent
which one of our
yourself
customers
and then
created, which is an
reinvent yourself
interactive advertisement.
and
After
stay
the
out of
video
the
ends,
clutches of
in an actual
mediocrity.
scenario,
Invent
customers can
yourself
actually
and then
interact with the car.
reinvent yourself.
Go around the car,
Change your
turn it
tone
around,
and
go
shape so
inside,
often that they
take a
can
look
never
at the
categorize you.
interiors, change the interiors, and again
Reinvigorate
take a look at
yourself
the how
and
it looks
accept
like,
what is,
so on and so forth. So
but only on the
amazingly
terms
realistic
that you have
experience for
invented.
them.
Be
Instead of virtual
self-taught
reality, headset.
and reinvent your life because you must. It is your life, and its history and the present belong only to you.
All right. So that's the kind of experiences which we are talking about. So RTX basically is that kind of an ecosystem, that kind of a technology which will help you do all of these things. Now, once we had RTX, the next thing for us to create was something called as an RTX server. Now, what is RTX server? RTX server is not something which NVIDIA is going to produce and sell to you. Absolutely not. This is a concept, a reference design, as we would like to call it. This is available from your favorite OEMs like HP, Dell, and so on and so forth. The idea is basically to create a machine which has got multiples of RTX GPUs in it, right? And chart out a way of optimally using these GPUs for multiple tasks. So that's basically the idea. Now, let me give you an example. If you are a design studio, if you're an animation studio or a design studio, you would have two types of workflows. I mean, you would have designers who are basically using your workstations to do the design part, and you will have a rendering engine at the back end, a rendering farm at the back end, clusters of servers which are basically doing the rendering part, heavy lifting part. The designer designs and he sends it for rendering at the back end. Now, with the RTX server, what you can do is was there a question? All right. So with RTX server, you can actually have a very high density rendering engine, which can also do certain other things. Okay, we will go through some of these. Two of these which are basically of importance to you is rendering and AR and VR. Okay, so that's the two things which we are going to put a little more time on. But before that, let me tell you, start with rendering. Now, if you look at rendering, there are two types of rendering, right? You have the offline rendering, which basically is the final frame rendering, where you send the whole of your design for getting the final output of another project. Right now, you have, I mean, if you are a production firm, you will have a whole lot of servers at the back end in a data center, which is running this rendering workflow. If you're not or if you're a smaller firm, you will probably have a cloud service provider who will basically take your rendering data set, render it and give it to you. Okay, one of these. The other option is basically the other type of rendering is viewport rendering. Now, viewport rendering is important when you are doing the design part, because this is where you have the first cut view of how the scene is going to look like, and how the lighting is going to look like, so on and so forth. This is before you do the final rendering, and both of them are important for designers. So RTX server can be used in both ways. You can put it as a huge GPU accelerated rendering engine in your data center for offline rendering. You have to use a appropriate GPU renderer, and the whole experience is powered by RTX GPUs at the backend on servers. Of course, you have the CUDA X AI, which basically adds all the libraries, all the SDKs required for running your AI-related task flows and CUDA-related stuff. And then you have Optics, which basically is a collection of denoising and other AI-related tasks in your workflow. So with this software stack, you can actually run a GPU-enabled rendering application, and that basically gives you the final frame rendering capabilities on an RTX server. You can also connect your notebook where you're doing the design, or your workstation where you're doing the design, to this huge rendering engine at the backend, and offload all your viewport rendering to that particular engine. Now, what will happen is your application is not going to depend on your graphics card or your processing power on your laptop or mobile workstation or a physical workstation or a desktop for the viewport rendering part. It can basically leverage a huge or bigger rendering engine which is sitting in the data center, and that makes your design iterations faster. Now you can see the design turn up much faster than what it used to happen on your typical workstation. So that's another way of doing that. One of the new ways of using this huge engine is basically to slice the GPUs into smaller parts, or slice the machine into smaller parts, and allocate these smaller parts to your design folks in the day, which will act as their design workstation, right? So from morning 7 to evening 7, you are slicing up this machine into smaller machines called as virtual machines, and then allocating this to individual designers so that they can do their design job on that. From evening 7 to next day morning 7, you switch off all these smaller machines and combine the GPUs into a huge rendering server as it is, and then run all your rendering workload on that server. So design by day, right, workstation by day, and render node or compute by night. So this is another example of how this can be used, and this is gaining a lot of traction because customers are figuring out that, okay, now I don't need to have separate workstations for my design guys and rendering farm of servers at the backend for rendering. So I can have now one unified infrastructure which can be used for design in the day and rendering at night. So this is another way of using that. And if you want to look at the applications which are basically enabled for RTX, these are some of the applications which are already there in the market now. Blender is one of the open source rendering engines which is pretty popular. Blender now with version 2.81 onwards, Blender is RTX enabled. So which basically means if you're using Blender and if you have an RTX GPU at the backend, it is going to give you much better performance. If I want to put a number, it is 8 times faster than your CPU-based rendering, right? Similarly, there are two commercial applications. One is V-Ray Next GPU and Autodesk Arnold, which is a very popular rendering application in the industry, is now RTX enabled. Now, when I say RTX enabled, it can actually take advantage of the ray tracing cores in the GPU. So both of them are RTX enabled now. Some amazing performance improvements, like 18 times faster than CPU, is what V-Ray Next GPU gives you when you have RTX GPUs in it. And if you look at Arnold, it is 17 times faster than CPU. On the product design side, we have something called a SolidWorks. It's an application. Now, SolidWorks has got something called as a live rendering, live view window, where you can actually apply material, textures, lighting, so on and so forth to your CAD design, like the bike you see here, and visualize it immediately, instantly. And with the RTX enablement, it gives you 15 times better performance than your CPU. So this is a kind of speed up we are talking about. We are not talking about twice the speed or 1.5 times the speed. We are talking about 10 times and 15 times and 17 times and so on and so forth. This is another example, which is a live example actually. Lost in Space is a series. It's a Netflix series. And we introduced RTX server to the design team, and this is what they experienced. One frame which used to take 38 minutes to render on a CPU node just takes 6 minutes on a RTX enabled node. Total render time 120 frames took 76 hours on a CPU node, which took just 3 hours on a RTX server. 25 times performance improvement, and the number of nodes to do that was 25 in terms of CPU enabled, only CPU enabled servers. Whereas with RTX, you just needed one server to do that same job. So 25 times less number of nodes, and that basically brings in a whole lot of other advantages, like the amount of money you have to spend to set this up, the kind of power you need to run this facility. Now imagine if you are a freelancer, or if you are a small time facility, or if you're a startup and who wants to get it rendered, just use RTX and you can do it without having a huge render farm at the backend. Right? That's a kind of democratization which we are looking at with our RTX and enabled applications.
The new RTX server, coupled with GPU-accelerated renderers like Autodesk Arnold, allows artists to get the full benefit of GPU-accelerated rendering, both for their interactive desktop and batch rendering when they need to deliver frames overnight. The RTX server is built on top of Quadro RTX 6000 or Quadro RTX 8000 GPUs. The artists work in a Quadro virtual design workstation. So all their work is done in the RTX server, and the results are streamed to their desktop over the network in a smooth, seamless experience. They see their changes right in front of them, all the correct lighting and shadow behavior, reducing guesswork, increasing productivity, and increasing creativity. When they're done with their shots and they submit it to the batch render, the RTX server will also process and GPU accelerate those batch renders as well. So each individual frame can come back up to 6 times faster on Autodesk Arnold. So where a single CPU node may process 1 frame, an RTX server will be processing 4 frames at the same time. So the RTX server, coupled with an RTX accelerated renderer like Autodesk Arnold, allows artists to stay creative, allows studios to save cost, and deliver the products their clients need.
All right, so that's basically how RTX is going to help you accelerate your rendering part. Okay, now so I'll skip this because it's you don't need to do all the details about the product and all. We are here if you need us to talk about that. Let's talk about VR and AR, the XR part of it, right? So one side we have spoken about how to speed up the quality of or increase the quality of your experiences, and how to get it done in less amount of time using RTX as a technology. Now RTX as a technology has other other advantages also, other areas also. We spoke about, all of you know that VR is actually entering a matured phase when it comes to enterprise markets, right? And if you are a VR startup, if you are a VR startup or a VR invested firm, you will know this. And these are the industries which are basically taking advantage of VR in multiple different ways: manufacturing, or architects, or media entertainment for virtual production. Virtual production is catching up really fast now. There was a showcase in India, in Mumbai. Famous Studios did a showcase of virtual production along with Unreal Engine a couple of months back, actually. So it's actually catching up, and it's going to revolutionize the way movies are being made. Training and location-based entertainment, of course, had been there for some time. And if you look at AR, AR is basically seeping into into enterprise market this way. Now I'm talking about enterprise because enterprise is the place where you get to make money. That's a place where you actually have good revenue generation opportunities when it comes to AR and VR, right? So you have the instructive collaboration aspects. AR is used there. Then you have digital models of buildings and equipments and so on and so forth, which basically helps people to operate the machinery, get trained on them, or fix something when something goes wrong. And then annotated experiences where you use AR to find out what exactly is around you, or you gather more information about something around you. Now, technology, if you actually look at technology, if you want to talk about where technology is going and how technology is progressing, it's pretty difficult to predict how future technology is going to be used. I'm just going to take a generic example here. In 1977, an HPC station, HPC is basically high performance computing. These are basically the supercomputers, where you churn, petabytes and zettabytes of data to come out with nuclear modeling and so on and so forth. HPC used to look like this in 1977, and trust me, the amount of power you see on the left side picture, which basically used to take a whole room and maybe consume kilowatts of power. The same power is what you see in the middle in 1997. It's an SGI workstation, for those who don't know. It's extinct now, but the same power is there sitting on your desk, right? Consuming maybe 1/10 or 1/20th of power, right? Today, it's here, right? What you see in 1977 in a room full of computers and 1997 on your desktop taking some space there. The same level of compute power is available in a tablet sitting on your desktop today, right? It's insane if you look at the scale, how it has evolved. Now, there's a very famous quote, if you have heard about this. This was by Mr. Watson, CEO of IBM. He said, this is around World War II. Okay, he said that I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. Right. This was said in somewhere in 1940s time frame. Okay. Now you may go ahead and laugh at that comment. But in 1990s, if I asked you who would need a computer with powerful graphics, fast network, gigabytes of storage, and massively parallel processing, then you will probably, in 1990s, you will tell me, not me, maybe engineers, military scientists, or very big gamers, maybe. So that would be your answer. But today, if I ask you, you will say, I need it, or I already have it, right? That's the way the technology is evolving. And that's pretty difficult for us to fathom. That's the beauty about technology. The futuristic technology is just an imagination for us, and we wouldn't be able to believe in it. If someone had told these guys in 1977 that the same kind of power would be available on a tablet sitting on your desk, they would have just laughed at them, right? But that's how it went from power user side to pervasive, right? That's how the technology has developed. And for AR and VR, or XR, for example, to be precise, that's the same dream, or that's the same direction which we are looking at. We are looking at AR and VR and or MR or XR, to shorten it, from a power user niche kind of technology to pervasive technology, something which is available everywhere, something which is present everywhere, omnipresent. That's the kind of transition we are looking at. That's the kind of transition which it is going to have in the future. It may be a little difficult to believe now, but trust me, we are almost there. Now, if you look at VR, it still is going through the challenges which we had when it came out, or when it started flourishing. It still needs a massive compute power at the back end to pump all those pixels. 450 megapixels per second is what you need for a 4K screen at 90 FPS. 4K screen is, I'm talking about combined 4K. I'm not talking about each eye 4K. I'm talking about combined 4K. And it has that motion to photon requirement of being within 20 milliseconds, turnaround. Otherwise, you are going to get nauseated. And if you look at the way the VR headset resolutions are going, it is insane. By 2021 or say 2022 max, we will have headsets which will give you 4K per screen, right, per eye. That's the kind of that's the kind of a resolution explosion which is happening in a VR headset. So as I told you in the beginning of the presentation, it's all about improving the content, improving the quality of the content, right? Improving the experience. Can I go from 4K? Can I go from what was 640 by 800 in the first Oculus? It came to a usable, okay performance of 1280 by 1440 by the time we were in Oculus Rift, or 1080 by 1200 when the HTC Vive came out. Today you have very decent headsets which give you 2K experience, which is basically the HP Reverb gives you 2K by 2K resolution per screen, and we are looking at 4K and then beyond that. So that's the kind of improvement we are looking at the content quality. With that, yes.
Sir, so that's a wonderful. Yes, sir. I was just stating that it's a wonderful point that how much VR and AR they have grown over the particular time, and perhaps how this Moore's law, perhaps, right? That is also being applied. That technology is increasing exponentially.
Absolutely.
So, like most of us are students here. So I just wanted to ask one question, and sorry to interrupt, which is really simple. As in, how can we work on furthering this augmented reality and virtual reality technology in the hardware side, and not in just in the development side, sir?
Okay. So I'll try and cover that in the following slides. Let's see if we have some points there. Right? Yeah. Let's move on this. Right. So from from a hardware point of view, I just want to come back to the Turing architecture, the GPU architecture. There are a couple of technologies which we introduced to make the VR experience much better. Now, as I told you, the resolution of VR headset is increasing. All the headsets are increasing. Also, the field of view is also increasing, right? It's limited to somewhere around 100, 120 degrees now. But new headsets like the Vajero, it gives you much wider field of view, which basically means you remove that limitation field which you get when you use nowadays the headset of today. But when you have an ultra wide field of view, it basically means your rendering workload also increases. So there are certain technologies which we came out with, like variable rate shading, where we pick and choose regions from the scene to shade in different resolutions. So the central point, which is basically the focal point of the scene, will be rendered in a higher resolution, whereas the peripheral side, the peripheral areas of this the image or the scene will be rendered in a lower quality or lower visual quality or lower resolution. You can basically save a lot of compute power by doing that. Another one is multi-view rendering. Multi-view rendering is basically an extension to something as called as single pass stereo, which we introduced with Pascal architecture, where you create the geometry once and then pass it through the render pipeline once, and the different images for your left eye and right eye are created simultaneously by the software SDK. So that's something which we introduced in Pascal. In Turing, we are extending that to increase the number of the number of viewpoint projections from 2 to 4, right? Because when you are talking about ultra wide field of view, you are basically talking about more amount of screen space, and with just 2 viewpoint projections, it is not sufficient. So we are increasing it to 4 now. So on these 4 screens, all the 4 views are available in a single pass, and they are position independent. You can actually pick and choose. You can shift it on along any axis in any projective space. So that's the beauty of that. I told you about RT cores. RT cores can be used for rendering the ray tracing part beautifully. In addition to that, because it is a path tracing algorithm, path tracing hardware, it can also be used to simulate sound waves, or how sound is propagated in a 360-degree VR experience. And we have something called as VRWorks Sound SDK, which basically VRWorks Audio, which can basically do this. All you need to have is a Turing architecture GPU with RT cores in that. So these are some of the advantages, or some of the new things which we added to our architecture, so that VR can basically become faster and better. And of course, we work with our HMD manufacturers to and software ecosystem players to integrate all this. Right? Let's talk about a different angle of VR now. Now, VR today is tethered, right? It is tied down to a system, headset, and you have to be physically there to basically use that. At the best, you can basically get a wireless, private wireless kind of setup, where your or maybe a backpack kind of a workstation where it is bound to you and you can move around. But then that doesn't make it pervasive, right? Our aim is basically to make these technologies pervasive. It is still limited to a particular room, a particular area where that computing power is available. So one technology which is going to change that is 5G, right? 5G is 5G. It's a telecom technology. It's a new standard of connectivity which is going to come in. Expected to come in. I don't know when it is going to happen in India though, but 5G is going to change the game. Good thing is,
yes, sir. Like,
right.
yes, sir. Sorry to Yeah, sorry to interrupt on this particular part. Indeed, sir, 5G is a wonderful technology that is taking place in the current scenario. And but yes, sir. So and there were some questions also posted which were relevant to this. So should we head straight to the questions, sir? Because if the particular presentation like we can straight away head to the questions because a lot of students have have expressed their willingness to ask you questions, sir.
Sure, sure. Please go ahead. Yeah, I can take the questions also maybe.
Yeah. So, so basically, so like one of the questions that is asked by Dheeraj Kumar is Dheeraj Kumar, and that is basically really simple. That in India, there's a huge, there is a problem of low internet connectivity and
Hmm.
very low buying capacity for amongst the public. So, how
Right.
can these emerging technologies, whether it's 5G or whether it's immersive technologies, how they can reach to the masses? How can they change the lives of everyone? So that is the basic question asked by Dheeraj Kumar.
Yeah, okay. I will explain how 5G or how the how we are trying to change the game in when it comes to AR and VR. It is part of the slide deck. But any other question which I can combine along with this?
Yes, sir. Like there have been multiple questions, so we can like straight away skip to them and
Okay.
complete it.
Yeah,
So
sure.
like so how so if you could like just answer this particular question, sir, in which how like there is low buying capacity amongst the Indian public. There is a
Yeah.
lack of internet connection as well. So how can we impact the masses?
Yeah. So internet connectivity is something which is very much required. Uh, Unfortunately, there is nothing much you can do on that side. So all the new technologies, all the new advancements are tied down to internet being available. My belief is that, or I trust that there are companies who are working on making the internet availability much better for our country. So that is something which will happen eventually. Now, the purchase capacity is something which is tied down to right now. What happens when you want to have a VR experience or an AR experience is that you need to invest in the in the compute power which is required for running that particular experience. You need to have that specified headsets which are basically which will give you that experience. Moving forward, what will happen is once 5G comes in, there is something called as streamed VR, right? Cloud-based VR. Cloud-based VR and AR experiences will be available like like Google Drive or like Amazon Amazon web services, AWS instances. Once that technology is implemented, there will be service providers who will give you the compute power required to run these technologies at a backend in a data center, which you can lease out or which you can use, pay as you go. You don't have to basically keep invested in a particular hardware piece. That is what is
Yeah.
going to change it. That is why it is going to democratize this technology. And once that happens, the need for very high end, very specific headsets also will start to change. There will be headsets which will come into the market which will be much less expensive to obtain. There will be headsets which you can basically use with your phone, which will give you the same level of. So today, if you use a mobile phone for a VR experience, your experience is limited. Why? Because your mobile phone only has a certain amount of compute and graphics power in it to process the images or do the rendering part. How do you change that? Is basically offload the rendering, offload the processing, the graphics workload into a backend cloud kind of a system, and from there you stream it using a fast internet to your device. When you do that, you will be able to enjoy the same level of VR experience even with a mobile based headset, and that will change the consumption of VR and AR drastically. That's what I believe.
Oh, that's
Did,
a
did
really insightful answer, sir. Thank you for answering that. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering that, sir. And just one sentence that perhaps which you want to like to share with these particular students on how exactly should they work harder in these particular times.
Absolutely. So my advice is don't lose heart. Not everything is lost actually. When there is a crisis like this, there is always an opportunity for all of us, right? Moving forward, where AR and VR are going to contribute is basically to deliver services which are personally done today, right? For example, if you take a good AR experience, you can integrate AI into it. For example, if you have an avatar, which is basically in your AR experience, you can now enable NLP, natural language processing technologies, which is based on AI, to enable the person to talk to that avatar, talk to that experience, and the avatar basically understands what you are saying, and it basically corresponds to or responds back to you with a proper answer. Some kind of a chatbot which is available inside a AR or a VR experience. That'll be very good to have, because imagine a telemedicine place where a patient gets a feeling of sitting and talking to a doctor rather than talking to someone on the phone or on a computer screen. So that's basically going to change the way people are going to perceive it. And eventually we will come to a place where virtual reality is no more something like wearing a headset and then having an experience. Virtual reality will become a way of interacting with computers in your realistic world, where your keyboard, mouse, and all these things will become things of the past, and you will be interacting with experiences in a backed by computers rather than interacting with the computer. You'll be interacting with experiences backed by computers. That's what is going to happen in the future. So virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality, or you want to call it extended reality, it is a very important technology to be invested in, and the growth in that area is going to come from technologies like 5G. So stay invested, keep learning on converging these technologies together, like 5G and AI and XR. Bring them together. Think of scenarios, think of services which will integrate all of them together, and that basically will be a winning product for. So that's my advice to the student community on this.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. That has been a wonderful.
I hope So before ending, I just want to tell you, all of you, if you're interested in learning about new technology, there is nothing better than GTC 2020. This time GTC is digital. So just go to nvidia.com/GTC, register. Jensen's keynote is basically on 14th May, 6:30 p.m. IST onwards. You won't be disappointed. There are going to be huge amount of amazing technologies being announced in this year's GTC. So stay tuned. And yes, if you need anything from my side, always here. These are my contact details. You can note it down and get in touch with me. Thank you so much for being an amazing audience.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for being here. And do post your contact details. Our attendees, the NVIDIA is like one of the most prime locations for them to work on. They love to intern there, they love to work there, and it's one of the dream positions to be there. Pramod sir, would you like to end the talk by giving some thoughts on Sasi Kumar sir?
Sure. Thank you, Faraz. And thanks a lot, Sasi. You have been a wonderful speaker, and we always look towards having you on our sessions. And it adds a hardware touch to all our software thing. So the kind of abstraction which you add and where required, you elaborate on the things. It is something which our students can always make good use of. So thanks for being here. Thanks for giving your precious time for this session. And I would also like to thank Elixir Systems, Ahmad, Faraz, Sashakt, Harshit, and Shivam for their support to maintain all these webinars and all these things. And I would like to give a loud shout to AirMeet, who actually happens to be our connectivity partner, and all that thing they arranged it for. So it's a nice platform, and I wish them all the very best for this. And thanks a lot, Sasi. It was very wonderful having you here, and we look forward towards more future sessions with you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Our next session is tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so our next session is tomorrow with Dr. Rohini Srivastava. Please, she's Microsoft India's CTO. Please do connect with it, and we will be posting links on the emails and on WhatsApp group soon. Everyone, thank you for being part of this wonderful session. Thank you, Pramod sir. Thank you, Harshit. Thank you, Shivam.
Harshit, you can end.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. So thank you, Pramod sir. Let's end the session now.
Yes. Fine.
Yeah.
Arshit, can you end the live session from there?
Everyone do and do fill the form that I've given on the particular chat for understanding what exactly were your opinions for the talk.
Faraz, you can check the form once again because it is not opening.
I'll just end from my side.